Happy Sunday evening, Frank Rock, House of Orange Sports Channel. I'm telling you, man, everything just feels right. Now, of course, college football, week two is in the books now as Tennessee dominates North Carolina State last night, 51-10, among other games last night. But today's the first Sunday of the NFL season as well. Round one of the NASCAR playoffs, Atlanta. That was a good race today as well. It just feels like everything is going good. The weather's cooling down. It is the greatest time of year right now. And I'm excited for what I'm doing right now. I've talked about getting into some of these series and stuff. That's really my thing and where I want to stand out from other channels because, everybody's covering teams, breakdowns, this such thing. This is kind of my thing I enjoy, and it is something that's kind of different. Just look at the process of it. So much talk today. Of course, Tennessee, the polls come out today. Tennessee's ranked seventh in the AP poll, ninth in the coaches poll, if I saw that right today. And of course, some of these writers out here, they've seen some different stuff than I've seen so far. But look at this Tennessee team. The big talk, always through the Josh Heupel era, it's been the offense, the offense, the offense, the offense. What's been the big talk, especially after last night? It's the defense. What this defense is doing. The comments I've seen today from people talking now, you're starting to see, man, people can get off Tim Banks' back now. And you think about it over this time, ever since Tim Banks come in, people have been critical as to his defenses, what they've done. There's time, I'll be honest, there's times I've questioned it too. Some of the performances you see where you'll see the one good one, and then all of a sudden you'll turn around and see something totally different. But I think you look at it and you've got to give credit to this defensive staff. As for the most part, it's been intact during this time since Josh Heupel come back. Tim Banks, the first hire of it was Rodney Garner. If I'm not mistaken, Rodney Garner, he might have even been hired in before Heupel come in because people at that time blew my mind because they're like, well, I don't know why you hire him in. Don't let the defensive coordinator make that. Because you're hiring the best defensive line coach in all of college football. You don't turn that down. Any defensive coordinator that comes in, if they don't want Rodney Garner, they're crazy. All right? They're crazy. He's the best. He's been the best. We're seeing it here. We saw it. He did it at Auburn. He did it at Georgia. When he was at Tennessee back in the late 90s, he didn't do defense then. But where he goes, good things happen. The guy can recruit, he can develop, he can coach. You're seeing it now with this Tennessee roster as it has possibly the deepest defensive line in my lifetime. Now, don't get me wrong. Some of those 90s, early 2000s former defensive line were excellent. They were great. I don't know that they went 14 deep, though. Now, were they more top heavy? Possibly so, because you had many NFL guys come out of those lines. Many guys who made a difference in the NFL as well. So I'm not saying this line is better. Okay. I'm talking in terms of how deep they can go, in terms of how they can rotate out the depth. But let's get into how this roster has evolved, this defense, from when Josh Heupel was hired to where they're at now. And the first thing I want to look at here is the 2020 football roster. Jeremy Pruitt's last year, 3-7 in that 10 game SEC schedule. I'll be honest, I love that. I didn't love the 3-7. I loved the 10 game schedule. Loved it. That was big boy football. You had to show up to play every week. Tennessee started that season off 2-0, and then the wheels fell off at halftime of Georgia on that year, and they never come back on. I know they got their third win in it. Let's see, who'd they beat? Vanderbilt. They beat Vanderbilt. They beat South Carolina, Missouri, and then Vanderbilt. Let's look this 2020 roster up right now as I pull that up. So I'm just going through the defense. I'm not focused on the offense because this is about the defense. So let's look at 2020. This was Jeremy Pruitt's last year. Let's look at the DBs here. Bryce Thompson, Trayvon Flowers, Alante Taylor, Warren Burrell, Kenneth George Jr., I'm trying to focus on Sean Schamberger, Key Lawrence, Tyus Fields, Danico Slaughter, Tamarian McDonald, Jalen McCullough. There was Bishop, he was a walk-on, but he was supposed to be pretty good. Theo Jackson. I mean, look here, Will Brooks. There you go. That's when Will Brooks come in. Who would have thought from then till now the name Will Brooks and what that would be? And hats off to Will Brooks, who come in and has stayed the course. Cheyenne LaBruzza. So there's your DBs. So now let's look at the defensive line. Jaquan Blakely, Savion Williams, Elijah Simmons, Omari Thomas, Dominic Bailey, R.J. Perry, Karat Garland, Latrell Bumpus, Greg Emerson, Matthew Butler. I'm just going through the scholarship guys. Darrell Middleton, Aubrey Solomon, John Mincy, Tyler Barron. Barron was as a linebacker. That was under Pruitt because they played the 3-4. So you look at then Tyler Barron, Henry Toa, DeAndre Johnson. Quasi Garland was a walk-on, but he played a decent bit. Morvan Joseph, who I think now he was more of a defensive end, but they played the bigger line. I mean, look at Bryson Eason here, linebacker. Now he's a defensive tackle. Aaron Beasley, Quavaris Crouch, we know about Martavius French, Roman Harrison, who played predominantly line the last few years. Jeremy Banks, who started off as a running back at Tennessee. Solon Page. And that is it for your defensive guys. So if you look at that as to what Josh Heupel inherited out of that group here. So Bryce Thompson went pro after 3 years. Trayvon Flowers played it out. Alante Taylor, he played Josh Heupel's first year because he set out the bowl game. People were unhappy with that. But, I think that I don't blame a guy this day and age. Warren Burrell did play for Tennessee. He did transfer out at the end of last season. Kenneth George Jr. transferred out. Schamberger transferred. Key Lawrence transferred to Oklahoma. He's now he transferred to Ole Miss. He went to Oklahoma, and now I'm pretty sure he's at Ole Miss. Tyus Fields transferred out. Danico Slaughter transferred last year to Arkansas. Tamari McDonald transferred after last year. I know he went to Ole Miss. I think he's at Louisville now, if I'm not mistaken. Jalen McCullough played it all the way out. Theo Jackson now with the Minnesota Vikings come in. Will Brooks, Will Brooks still making his case. Cheyenne LaBruzza never really done much there. So if you look at those DBs now and what they did during that time, now look at where they are in the defensive backfield now and what Willie Martinez has done. So I want to shift gears now a little bit to Tennessee's 2020 signing class. So this would have been Jeremy Pruitt's last one. And so let's just look at from that class who is, and this is according to On3. So there's the next coming of Peyton Manning, Harrison Bailey. There. Again, I'm going defense on this one. So there was Key Lawrence, Omari Thomas come in that 2020 class, still making a difference now. Had a couple tackles for loss last night. Tyler Barron, I'll give Tyler Barron credit. I thought he was good last year, but, the fact that including Tennessee this year, has been on 4 rosters. Now he's at Miami. I know he had a good week 1. There's something there as to why that happens. Transferred to Ole Miss. Then he went to Louisville. And then he ended up at Miami. Lynette Whitehead was rated as a linebacker coming in, played running back, couldn't stay healthy. He's, to my knowledge, still at Georgia. You look at Morvan Joseph here, consensus 4-star across the board, never panned out. He transferred. Dominic Bailey, here he is, consensus 4-star. He had a strip fumble. He had a good game last night, still making a difference. Here, Bryson Eason, 4-3 and 4, because On3 didn't yet have they were not a thing, but I like that they have these rankings from the other sites, 24/7 ESPN Rivals, because VolQuest was still with Rivals during this time. Actually, Eason was recruited as a linebacker, now playing defensive tackle and doing a nice job. He had a good game last night. Here was Martavius French. It was Bryson Eason, Martavius French, and Tamarian McDonald, if I'm not mistaken, who all come in together out of Memphis. And French was kicked off. He is at Texas San Antonio now? Possibly graduate. I can't remember if he had eligibility or not. Danico Slaughter, I thought did some good things while at Tennessee, but he was one transferred to Arkansas this offseason. And then this thing keeps jumping around on me here a little bit, looking at guys who come in. There's McDonald there. So if you look at that group and what they added, all right. So if we look then at what it was, out of all those guys, we see how many guys after 2020 transferred out. What was it? Over 30 guys transferred out in this program. So Josh Heupel, when he takes over, took him a little bit to find a defensive coordinator. People didn't want it. They went after one of Ohio State's linebacker coaches, made a pretty generous offer. Ohio State matched, he didn't come. I'm not sure whom else there was, but then they end up getting Tim Banks from Penn State. And it seemed like, too, when they hired Tim Banks, it was a good hire. It was a guy with some experience. He had some experience. He was a co-defensive coordinator. And then you come in. Then they add Willie Martinez, defensive backs coach. You add Brian Jean-Marie, linebackers coach. Of course, Mike Eckler, who's still there, outside linebackers and special teams, and Rodney Garner. A lot of continuity during that time. The only change they've had during that time was this year when Brian Jean-Marie went back to Michigan, and then William Inge come in. And what those guys inherited to me as well. I want to fast forward now to that 2021 class. I'm breaking this up into parts, or it'll take me a while to do a lot of this as we get to the results. So then I'm just going part one tonight. We're going to look at the rebuild of the roster, and we'll look at from 2020 to 2021, and then we'll go a little more on that in the coming episodes. Of course, we'll be live tomorrow night. Kerry Williams, myself, will be live 7:30 tomorrow night as well, and might be able to work in a little bit of talk on that. So I'm now going to pull up the 2021 roster and where we're at, and looking at those positions and looking what Josh Heupel and company inherited Tim Banks in that first year. So now I first want to go to that was your 2020. That was with Jeremy Pruitt. Those guys played. Now let's go to the 2021 class. Here, I'm going to pull this up and look at it. I think this will be pretty eye-opening for you as well when we look at this one. So I'll try to keep this under 20 minutes. I hope you'll kind of stay with me and along the way. So if we look at 2021, this is going on 3 right here. Aaron Willis was considered the prize of that class as far as defensive-wise. Consensus 4-star. Did not make it long. Here's Caden Salter. That's one of them. Cayman Marley, another guy on North Carolina, consensus 4-star. Really did nothing here. Transferred out. Christian Charles, he's had his moments. He's played some, but also at the same time, he stayed hurt. He was out all last year. He's playing this year, but he's still, I think he was banged up in the first game. Now looking down the line here at some of here's Deshaun Rucker, a guy transferred to South Florida this past season. There was Byron Young, a great pickup, Byron Young, and what he did and his story, now playing for the Rams. Amari McNeil, he was a guy who was playing, transferred out. Isaac Washington, nothing at Tennessee. Brandon Turnage played a little bit, had the one good game against South Carolina. I guess that would have been 2021. Had that good game, SEC Player of the Week, and honestly, he didn't do much besides that. Caleb Tremblay come in from USC. I thought he was a solid addition in the year when he played. And then you look at all these transfers they took. Kamal Hadden, I felt bad for Kamal Hadden because, somebody brought on himself, especially at South Carolina game 2 years ago, 2022, when he did a lot of talking and was not doing a lot of backing it up. But Kamal Hadden would still get out there and battle. And last year he was starting to come in his own. Had the pick 6 against South Carolina. Yeah, that had to be a lot of retribution for him from the year before that. Starting to play his best ball at Tennessee. And then he had the unfortunate injury that ended his season. That sucked for him. Dejon Terry come in, played a little bit, and then he transferred to Oklahoma to be closer to home. He's still there now. I'm pretty sure this will be his last year with it. So Tennessee added those guys into the equation. So really not a lot of depth there. Now let's go to that 2021 roster here and looking at that defense, and just want to kind of see how it evolves. So here was the personnel. Slaughter, Trayvon Flowers, Alante Taylor, Warren Burrell, George, McDonald, Kamal Haddon, Christian Charles come in as a freshman. He was a Jeremy Pruitt recruit, stayed with. And then there's Tyus Fields, Jalen McCullough, LaBruzza, Theo Jackson. Now, Theo Jackson that year, I don't think Willie Martinez and Tim Banks get enough credit. Theo Jackson was really good that year. You had Theo Jackson, you had Alante Taylor. Your other corner was a little hit and miss. I mentioned Brandon Turnage when he came in that year. I think Theo Jackson, can't remember if he was hurt or he shifted to safety in that South Carolina game. And Turnage come in, played great. Here's Will Brooks still beating along. So there's your defensive backs. So, I mean, you look at this now as to what they took over in 2021. And, look at Jalen McCullough during that time. Look at what Jalen McCullough did in his evolution. There's a lot of times people said, well, Jalen McCullough's too slow. We need to replace him. And then last year happened, and he was really good last year. Same with Kamal Haddon, and it was along the way. Willie Martinez, Tim Banks, are they doing their job back here? Now, let's shift to the defensive line. And you think about this then versus now. Bumpus, Omari Thomas was a young dude playing Jaquan Blakely, Elijah Simmons, a guy who's had a lot of hard time staying healthy, who's finally starting to be healthy. Dominic Bailey was a redshirt freshman then, now a pretty vital part of that. There's Matthew Butler. I mean, Butler was very good at Tennessee. Dejon Terry, he did okay. Had his moments. Caleb Tremblay, I thought was pretty good. Aubrey Solomon was a guy, 5-star dude out of high school. I don't know that he lived up to that hype. I mean, he had his moments. Same with Karat Garland. Byron Young, I thought was pretty good. Tyler Barron had his moments. Roman Harrison was always a pretty solid guy. I mean, I don't think great, but definitely not bad either. And then you look at the linebackers. This is the eye-opener to me, and Brian Jean-Marie does not get enough credit for rebuilding that room to where it is now. Juwan Mitchell, I was high on them when they got him out of Texas. He was a bust at Tennessee. He was an absolute bust. End up last year transferring to Colorado. I don't know that he did much then. It was a guy that just could not get out of his own way. Talk about Quasi Garland. He was a walk-on. William Mohan was a transfer from Michigan with Brian Jean-Marie. Never did anything. There, Bryson Eason listed as a linebacker, now defensive tackle. Beasley was a guy who had his moment. He was pretty solid under Brian Jean-Marie. Pretty solid guy. I mean, you think about that Clemson game, the bowl game, and he was just lights out that night. Jeremy Banks he was an interesting cat. I mean, he had a motor that didn't stop. Unfortunately, it went too much sometimes. And I think ultimately with Jeremy Banks, he was another guy when it was all said and done, couldn't get out of his own way. And then you look at Solomon Page, Aaron Willis, who did nothing here, was hyped to do it. You just look at that defense now, where they started. And the fact that team in that season went, 7-6? 7-5, lost in the Music City Bowl to Purdue. Still a tough one to swallow. Purdue might have won that game. They might have outright won it, but the fact they took that, I don't have a problem that they didn't give Jalen Wright the touchdown at the end of that game. But, if the lineman's pulling it, his progress never stopped, okay? Let's say the lineman, you can't pull him forward. That's a flag they redo to play. Tennessee kicks the field goal. Does Purdue beat them with the touchdown? It could have happened. But that was a tough one to swallow. But you look at that defense. Why was Tennessee so bad against Purdue? Look at the personnel, man. Nothing against those guys. All those guys that were playing, and even the guys that have transferred, while they were here and playing, they gave their all for Tennessee. But let's face it, man. Let's look at that personnel then compared to now. Let's look at where it has come in 4 years' time. That's part one. I'm going to wrap up on that one. The fact that out of that roster that year, you could make a case Tennessee been 8-5 that year, depending on that bowl. There might be another game in there that they possibly, the Pitt game. I think they'd like to have that Pitt game back, the first one, because if Hendon Hooker starts that game, I believe they blow Pitt out of Neyland because Joe Milton missed a lot of passes. A lot of ifs and buts on that year. But at the same time, you look at what they had to work with. This was part one of the process, rebuilding of the roster. Tomorrow, almost look at 2022. We're going to continue to look at the recruiting as they add to it, the defections as they left the roster, and where this team is going leading up to the current 2024 roster and what they've done so far. I hope you'll like the content. Hit that thumbs up, share it out. If you have not already, I hope you'll subscribe to the channel. Still on that road to 2,000. It's we've been stuck in the mud this week. We've been spinning our tires, but I think we're about to get out of the mud. I think things are about to take back. I'm feeling pretty good where we're at right now, and lots of good content is coming on here as far as this little series here. I'm still going into my Rebirth of the Vols series, talking about just the evolution from that day Jeremy Pruitt was fired to where we're at now, and just how Tennessee has evolved into an everything school. Tennessee baseball, fall camps around the corner. We'll preview each position as we work towards that. I'm really excited about that. Tennessee basketball, Lady Vols basketball just around the corner next month. This channel is about to get busy. And I can assure you, football content is going to continue to be pumped out on here. We're going to continue to work at football. We're new to the game. We're the new kid on the block when it comes to football. Been around for months, or going on 9 months now, but new kid on the block when it comes to football. I can assure you, we got the right stuff coming, though. Frank Rock, House of Orange Sports Channel. I hope you have a great rest of your Sunday. Have a great Monday, and go Vols.